Together we march as one pride, from the offseason until the final whistle. I promise to do everything I can to bring honor to the blue and silver and to the community of Detroit. Through every play and every game, my effort will never waver and my attitude will remain strong. One team, one Detroit, one pride.
The Detroit Lions have many new faces in new places, both on the playing field and in the front office. How will new general manager Bob Quinn reset the franchise to ensure that they'll have sustainable success? Brandon Alisoglu is a Detroit Lions analyst for About.com, and he joined me earlier this week to dish on everything Lions as they prepare for the upcoming draft and the 2016 season. So first of all, Brandon, we're excited to be with you this afternoon on the Advantage Podcast, and we're ready to talk some Detroit Lions football with you this afternoon.
Right on, man. Thanks for having me.
So obviously the Lions have made several changes to their front office, to the football team, and the retirement of Calvin Johnson. So could you just give me your general impressions on what you've seen thus far from the Lions offseason?
Well, it's going to be a completely different team than the one that we're used to seeing over the past, decade. Calvin Johnson was a center point, a focal point of that offense. It was something that defenses had to strategize against. They couldn't go with their normal base defenses or whatever they would normally do. So that's kind of first and foremost. Bob Quinn is definitely coming in with a different approach, and while he did splurge on one free agent, Marvin Jones, to try to kind of not necessarily replace Calvin Johnson. We all have to stay away from that word when it comes to Calvin Johnson, but to kind of help mitigate the consequences of him retiring. So it's been an interesting one, but it's also been a quiet one. We don't really know exactly what he's going to do, and we won't until this draft is over.
Now, can you also tell me your impression of the Lions deciding to keep head coach Jim Caldwell for a third season?
At first, it was something that it didn't seem like a move that would make sense. There are a couple different theories out there about why maybe they would. Perhaps the first and foremost is the players love him. The players love playing for him. He's well respected in that regard, and he's very motivational. Players who want to play for him. Now, maybe Bob Quinn thought that he could come in and with the smaller adjustments he seems to be making to the roster and those types of moves, that the team is better set up now than it was before to kind of to succeed with Caldwell at the helm. But you also have to remember that Caldwell has a winning record in Detroit. So to cut him loose after a season of 7-9 football, while that was definitely a disappointment considering the talent on the team, it seems as prudence was the right way to go there. It was better to kind of hold on and see how another year goes now that they have Jim Bob Cooter running the offense and they have Terrell Austin back running the defense, and to kind of see if that trio can't find that 2011 or 2014 magic.
Now, when we look at the Lions offense, obviously it'll be a full year under Jim Bob Cooter as offensive coordinator. So can you just tell me about how you think the Lions offense will improve with a full year under Cooter and how it might change without Calvin Johnson?
Well, the second part of that question is probably the most difficult part because it's going to be a lot of defenses are not going to be keen on Calvin Johnson anymore. You're going to see different defenses, and probably ones that will be a little more risk taking. So it's something that Detroit's going to have to adjust to, especially on the offensive line. Teams will have more players available to blitz because they're not going to have two, maybe even three guys worried about Calvin on the outside. So that's going to be a huge adjustment. Hopefully that leads to more shorter passes when it comes to guys like Theo Riddick and Amir Abdullah and getting them in space. Because getting those two guys in space with the ball in their hand, or Golden Tate, those guys are all explosive and can get down the field quickly and make you miss. So if Detroit could kind of counteract the lack of Calvin Johnson with a little bit of an extension of its running game by getting the ball in the hand of their other playmakers, it might be okay. I'm not going to say better than Calvin Johnson. I never will. As far as the difference between Lombardi and Jim Bob Cooter, what we'll expect to see, I'm not entirely sure yet since the team really just started working. I think we'll see a little bit more of a simplification along with the blocking schemes, because the blocking schemes they were using, this kind of zone blocking, this lateral movement, it wasn't tailored to the talent he had on hand. And while Jim Bob Cooter didn't have time to put in an entire offense last season. You can't do that on the fly, but he did, little tweaks here and new plays and emphasis on certain areas, so that I would expect them to continue that trend to use more power runs. A play that they really loved to run last year was the counter Trey. That seemed to have a lot of success with that, especially with Amir Abdullah and Zach Zenner to some extent before he went down. So I think those will be the biggest changes as far as the type of running style they're going to use, more of a power base from the offensive line. And also Stafford threw, or on average, threw the shortest passes in the league last year. I don't know if that's going to change, at least in the beginning, until they figure out who's going to be the deep threat.
Now, when we look at Matthew Stafford, obviously he's going into his 8th year this year. And can you just tell me what you think he has to do to take the next step? Because without Calvin Johnson, a lot of eyes will be on him to see how he'll lead the team as well.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and it's one that has caused a lot of consternation in the Lions community, as we all know. Plenty of folks have declared their desire for a trade, which I do not see ever happening, nor would I ever advocate for. Stafford has given this team a winning record, and he can make all the plays when you need him to. He needs to work on his consistency as far as accuracy and putting the ball in a place where his receivers can catch it and still make a play after the catch. And that's probably something that has more to do with the offensive line. It's really tough to evaluate Stafford too much, and especially because we've never seen him without Calvin Johnson, and it's tough to know how he's going to react moving forward. I would expect that there will be a lot more, like I said, shorter passes and a lot of other guys involved. I think Ebron is going to have a much bigger role moving forward. Eric Ebron, the rookie from a couple years ago, the 10th overall pick, the tight end, because he does present a matchup difference. Now, Stafford can, I believe, get this team where it needs to be. He's a good enough quarterback, and he can make plays when they need to be made. He just needs to continue to be smart with the ball to keep from turning the ball over, which was obviously a huge problem at the beginning of last season. But he did end the season, I think it was the second half, with something like a 19-1 touchdown to interception ratio. And those numbers aren't exact, but they're pretty darn close over the second half of the season. So if he gets a little time, I think he'll be okay.
Do you think we'll see him more of a ascension as a leader, since he's sort of the elder statesman now on offense?
Yeah, I think that's been a bit of his role as well in the past, but I do believe it'll continue to grow, because Calvin was never really the expressive type. And it's funny, even just his demeanor, we don't call him Johnson, we call him Calvin. That's just, he's that near and dear to everybody in Detroit. I have seen, like Eric Ebron, I believe, was on the radio talking about how he stays close to Matthew Stafford on the sideline because he wants to know what he's thinking and what he's seeing. So that stuff's already happening. And we've seen Stafford be demonstrative the past few seasons, telling receivers where they need to be going instead of what read that they're missing. I think that will take another step, and that he will be continue to kind of take up that mantle as he has in the past.
Now, could you give me your early impressions of the Lions' schedule and how you think it'll fare next season? I know it's really early, but can you give me an idea of how you think the schedule will shake out?
Well, it's a much more forgiving schedule than last season. Last season, they had one of the toughest schedules in the year. This year, and obviously, as you stated, it's early, but they have one of the easier schedules based on winning percentage from last year. I think it's tied for the fourth easiest. One of the big things is they still have their midseason bye, which I don't know how Detroit keeps getting this lucky, but it's week 10 this year, so 1 week after the midseason. I find that's got to be something that they really need to take advantage of, because not many teams get that chance. Like Green Bay, I believe their bye week might be like week 4. So that's a big help. But as far as the opponents they're playing, Eric Schlitt of Detroit Jock City said on my podcast, Lion Central Radio, last night, that in the first 8 games, they are playing something like 5 or 6 quarterbacks that will have only 1 or 2 years starting experience, so young guys. And it's a chance for them to really come out of the gates a lot hotter than last season, setting up hopefully a better run on the second half, or an identical second half run as they had last year when they finished 7-1 or 6-2. The only other thing is they also don't have a lot of short weeks. They only have the one Monday night game, so that does help them to the extent that they will be able to continue to get into their normal rhythm. But as far as the opponents they're facing, the AFC South, there's some up-and-coming teams, but it's not overwhelming talent like they saw last year.
Now, we talked earlier about the return of Jim Caldwell, and obviously he's made a lot of changes to his coaching staff. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on what you're looking for from a coaching perspective from the Lions this season.
Well, it's somewhat unfortunate in the respect that he'll still be the man at the head, at the helm. And one of the problems with Caldwell, we talked earlier about how he's a great motivator and people love playing for him, but his in-game decisions can be head scratchers. And I think what Detroit really needs from him is for Caldwell to kind of either, I don't know if he needs to rely more on the expertise and knowledge of his coordinators or what it may be. But for instance, you go back to that Hail Mary against Green Bay, which kind of officially put the last nail in Detroit's coffin last season, where Detroit had nobody was rushing really the passer, and they had 2 guys standing about 15, 20 yards deep, as if they were preparing. The official response was that they were preparing for a lateral type play instead of the Hail Mary. We all know how that worked out.
Oh, we do. Yeah, I think Jim Caldwell was the only one expecting that play, but that's okay.
Exactly. And otherwise, though, the key thing is going to be, the new quarterbacks coach and obviously Jim Bob Cooter running the offense, is that they need to get consistent protection for Stafford, and then they need Stafford to be able to step into that pocket and deliver the ball with accuracy. And that'll be the 2 most defining aspects of this coming season.
2-part question for you, and it has to do with the upcoming draft. Obviously, when Bob Quinn took this job, one of the things he said in his introductory press conference is that the talent level across the board had to get better. And where do you see the Lions going in the draft, and do you think he's accomplished his goal with what he's done this offseason?
Yeah, it's as far as the overall talent level, I'm not sure if that's exactly on point, and mostly because how do you compare the drop off from Calvin Johnson to Marvin Jones and make that apply across the board? The stated goal of getting depth, though, and guys with versatility, he has done that. He has focused on guys who will play special teams and who will play reserve roles, guys like Johnson Betamosi and Tavon Wilson. I'm a little concerned about the lack of finding a true starting safety, and maybe he has more faith in guys like Raphael Bush and Tavon Wilson than I do, but he has done a good job as far as this team has always had a top-heavy roster with a lot of guys at the top and very little in the middle. And I'd say now it's a little more spread out. The guys in the middle can contribute. As far as the draft, as much as everybody wants first round, offensive tackle, I don't know that that's going to happen because I think there's too much. The talent discrepancy with the defenders he can get at that level at 16 is too great to overcome to reach for an offensive tackle or even a center. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if they moved back because Bob Quinn went to the Bill Belichick School of Drafting. Bill Belichick is known for making all kinds of trades, trading back, trading up, mostly trading back, obviously, in the first round and picking up as many picks as he can and then moving around later. So I think what he'll do if obviously there's another big trade today, both the first and second pick overall have been traded. So it's obviously possible that he could get out of that 16 spot. And if he can, he will. And then I think he'll move around and move up in that second and third to kind of find the right players for his offensive line. But otherwise, I think he's going to kind of reload along that defensive front.
And could you give me an idea of some players you think the Lions may be targeting in that first round?
Yeah, the first one, the two guys that have probably been mentioned the most, especially by the media and Lions draft Twitter, for lack of a better term, has been Andrew Billings, the defensive tackle from Baylor, who's a big, powerful young guy and he can kind of fill the Halati Nada role, especially when Nada moves on in probably a year or two. And Sheldon Rankins, who I think it's either he did or somebody else kind of compared him to Aaron Donald, who Detroit famously passed on to draft Eric Ebron a couple years ago. So some may see that as a chance to address that deficiency or that mistake. So it's probably those two, and I'm still holding out personally for hope for Shaq Lawson because I think he'd be a great fit, the defensive end from Clemson, who led the NCAA in tackles for a loss and also had 12.5 sacks. So I think it's probably going to be a defensive lineman.
And my final question for you has to do with the Lions consistently tell everyone that will listen that they're a playoff team. So what do you think they have to do to get off to a solid start as this season, maintain it throughout the year? And do you think they're a playoff team, or do you think they're a couple of pieces away?
Well, last season they were. If they had won that Green Bay game, and then hopefully that would translate necessarily over to the next week, where they kind of had a hangover against St. Louis and lost that game. If they had won that Green Bay game and then beat St. Louis, they probably would have ended up in the playoffs. So they weren't that far off to start, and that's all without DeAndre Levy, who is going to really change this defense next year. When you get a playmaker of DeAndre Levy's level back, it's somebody who can blow up plays all on his own, and that position goes from being a liability to an advantage. So I think that's going to be huge if they can keep some health with guys like Tyrone Walker and hopefully find a starting safety or just somebody to be able to handle that coverage role a little better. Then I think the defense is going to strengthen up quite a bit, and that's going to be the key. Them and the running game, if they can improve the running game by moving more to a power rushing approach, they should be playing Green Bay in the last game of the season for a playoff spot.
Brandon, we want to thank you for your time this afternoon and for chatting Detroit Lions football with us on the Two-Man Advantage podcast, and hopefully they'll find a way to sneak into the playoffs this year and actually have a reputable season for once.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears.
Have a great day, Brandon, and thanks for your time, buddy.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.